Rest in power to the legend, John Singleton.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and I am the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and you can find me on Twitter as always at redrock_bball. Today we're starting off our season in review series of podcasts, going to be going from the worst to the best teams in the NBA. So of course, talking about the worst teams in the NBA, we have to start with the absolute worst team in the NBA, the New York Knicks. We're going to be looking at what their off-season looks like, their summer coming up, the performance of the players, how much of that is replicable, some dynasty chatter as well. Michael Bolton, you don't want to hear any more preamble?
Let's get to it.
Let's get to it indeed. Almost didn't have an episode today. My mixer blew up and then had to go all around the world to try and find replacement parts. Got a replacement power supply. That didn't work. Had to end up getting a new mixer. So we're running through that. So hopefully there's no technical snafus as we try and work through this new technology that I've got now. Running the pod through. Hopefully everything goes according to plan. But we will see, and I'm sure you'll let me know if there's issues with the sound quality or anything like that. But a new mixer for today's show because of whatever sort of crap happened in the last 24 hours. Let's talk about this New York Knicks team. Obviously a disaster of a season, unless your goal was to be the worst team in the NBA, in which case it was a successful season. 17-65 the Knicks this season. They secure the worst record in the NBA. Of course, that doesn't give them any more odds than any other team in that worst four group, but it does mean that when they, if teams do jump ahead in the lottery, that they will get the first pick out of those ones. So it is advantageous in that area. The lowest they can drop in the draft now is number 5, with the lottery being for the first 4 spots in the draft, and then the flat odds across those first 3 teams there as well. So the Knicks have the 5th pick. Not a great situation to be in for this draft. Equally best odds at getting the number 1 pick. Still only 14.5% though of getting that selection. They only have one other draft pick coming up as well, and that is pick number 55 coming from the Houston Rockets. They trade away so many of their second round picks. We know that pick 31's in Brooklyn's hands at the moment. I think it originally was Philadelphia's pick. Sorry, it was the Knicks pick, went to Philadelphia. Now it's in Brooklyn's hands, so that pick 31, but they did get one back from Houston there at pick number 55. If you want to look at something positive when looking at their overall season stats, it's hard to find that. They had the worst offense in the NBA, the 26th ranked defense in the NBA. One thing they did do pretty well is got to the line, 8th highest free throw rate, so that's a positive in that regard. That helps a little bit when you got someone like DeAndre Jordan on your team for the last couple of months. He does have a pretty high free throw rate, but not a lot else is really massively encouraging on this squad. Actually, that's not true. Let's say 13th in blocks. That's not a bad result. Of course, Mitchell Robinson's the guy that's providing that value in that area there. But, efficiency-wise, they're 28th in three-point percentage, 30th in two-point percentage, 19th in free throw percentage. So really nothing really looking great in terms of their shooting ability. Overall last in effective field goal percentage as well. That free throw rate, though, is, I guess, something of a positive that you can hang your hat on. As a Knicks fan, we've got lots of minutes into younger players. They made trades, and they did clear up some cap space for next season. So let's go to that now and have a look at what this team does look like heading into next season. A bunch of guys are going to be free agents on this squad. If we look at the unrestricted free agents, we have got DeAndre Jordan, Mario Hezonja, Noah Vonleh. They are all unrestricted free agents. Now, the Knicks can get about $72 million in cap space, which should be enough for 2 max players. But to do that, they need to renounce the cap holds of Jordan, of Hezonja, of Vonleh, and these other guys that they have the ability to terminate their deals for. A whole bunch of restricted free agents. Emmanuel Mudiay, he is almost definitely gone. With his restricted free agency cap hold of almost $13 million, there's no way they're going to be bringing him back at that sort of a price to keep. They're going to have to renounce his rights. Maybe they can look to re-sign him at a minimum deal later on, but they are definitely not exercising that restricted free agent option on Emmanuel Mudiay's contract. You also have Luke Kornet, Billy Garrett, who signed late in the season, Isaiah Hicks, and Kadeem Allen. All of those guys are restricted free agents. And then you've got Alonso Tree, who has a team option. He was a two-way guy, then signed that two-way deal. He has a team option for this coming season as well. And whether he returns, I guess, is going to really be dependent on what they do with their free agency. $3.5 million team option for next season for Tree. Then you've got someone like Damien Dotson, who is a $1.6 million non-guaranteed deal for next season. They can get rid of that to get that cap space up. And then Lance Thomas, who's due $7.6 million for next season, of which $1 million is guaranteed. So by renouncing all of those guys, Jordan, Hezonja, Mudiay, Kornet, Vonleh, Johnny Jenkins, Henry Allen's in that mix as well with an option on the contract, and Billy Garrett. All of those guys can get renounced, waiving Damien Dotson, waiving Lance Thomas with his $1 million player option, guarantee as well. We'll be able to get them to that $71 million in cap space, and they seem to have utmost confidence in being able to do that. So a lot of these guys we talk about, in particular Kornet and Tree, they may not even be on this team heading into next season, whereas guys like Hezonja, Mudiay, and Jordan almost guaranteed not to be on this team. And that could come back. Hezonja and Mudiay, but they have to go through the unrestricted free agent process. They won't retain any bird rights on any of those guys because they will have to renounce their cap hold to get to that max cap space that they are obviously really, really looking to do. We've heard about their free agency plans for quite a while. If you have plans of your own to acquire a free agent, the best way to do that is through using ZipRecruiter. Hiring used to be hard, multiple job sites, stacks of resumes, a confusing review process, but today hiring can be easy and you only have to go to one place to get it done, and that is ZipRecruiter.com/lockedon. ZipRecruiter will send your job to over 100 of the web's leading job boards, but they don't stop there. They use their powerful matching technology. ZipRecruiter scanning thousands of resumes to find people with the right experience, and they invite them to apply for your job. As those applications come in, ZipRecruiter analyzes each one, spotlights the top candidates so you never miss a great match. It is so effective, ZipRecruiter, that 80% of employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate through the site within the first day. And right now, my listeners can try ZipRecruiter for free at this exclusive web address, ZipRecruiter.com/lockedon. That's ZipRecruiter.com/lockedon, LOCKEDON, ZipRecruiter.com/lockedon. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire. All right, so that's the overview there of the Knicks. Big cap space goals. Lots of players are going to be gone on this team. That's going to leave guys, the only guys who have guaranteed deals for next year, there's very, very few of them. You've got Frankie Akina, you've got Dennis Smith Jr., you've got Kevin Knox, and you've got Mitchell Robinson. 3 guys on rookie scale contracts, plus Mitch Robinson, who is on that two-year guaranteed deal after being a second-round guy. Then he also has 2 more years after that, a non-guaranteed and a team option year, which for the cost of those contracts, he is definitely going to remain on this team, although they could decline that team option after the 3rd year and make him a restricted free agent, very similar to what the Denver Nuggets did with Nikola Jokic a couple of years back. But they're the guaranteed players in this team: Ntilikina, Smith, Knox, and Robinson, with a couple of those non-guaranteed, Thomas and Dotson, and the whole bunch of free agents. So in terms of working their cap space, it's been a big positive there. Now, whether they can get these guys and whether the risk of trading away Kristaps Porzingis to be able to acquire this cap space ends up being worth it, well, we'll find that out during the July free agency period. Let's have a look at some of these other guys now who are on this squad and what we could maybe see from them for the remainder of the season. Let's start with the best fantasy season of anyone on this squad, and that was DeAndre Jordan, despite not being sensational throughout the entirety of the year. Mainly his minutes dropped when he arrived in New York, but he was the 57th ranked player overall. The big surprise there, the 71% on free throws. Just an astonishing turnaround. He was no longer a punt free throw guy. Someone like Andre Drummond improved their free throws last season, but he still remained pretty much a punt free throw guy. That wasn't the case for Jordan. That is a huge, huge leap for him. Really boosted his value, but he only averaged 11 points with 13 rebounds, and the blocks still incredibly low. He is going to be 31 by the time next season starts. You can't imagine those blocks ever getting back up to 1.5 per game. He's never going to be a high assists or steals sort of a guy, but the field goal percentage from him is strong. Now, where he lies or where he lands in free agency is a big question mark. The Knicks have their centre of the future in Mitchell Robinson, so it's not going to be back here. Where is Jordan going to go as a guy who has had some significant declines during the last year or two? Defensively, he's nowhere near as good as what he used to be. He had a stage where he was overrated as a defensive player, and then his defense caught up, and now he's probably, again, still overrated as that defensive production has dropped off. He was a negative 6.7 on-off with this team. A lot of that's to do with how well Mitchell Robinson played when Jordan was off the court. But there is some concern that if I'm looking at him from a dynasty perspective, Jordan, I'm not looking at him as a long-term starting caliber player at the age of 31. I think we have to start considering him in the 24-minute-a-night role from here on out, and that'll decline, I imagine, relatively quickly. This $23 million deal that he got this season will be the last one of those deals that he is able to acquire. But still, he had some moments this season, nothing overly as fantastic, but that free throw improvement was obviously really impressive and sort of about a league average or a neutral PIPM, negative 0.05 in those 19 games that he did play as a member of the New York Knicks. The next highest ranked player for the Knicks, believe it or not, was Mitchell Robinson, the 79th ranked player overall, in only 21 minutes. And I spoke about him at length in the Dynasty Rookie Re-Ranks pod I did the other day. Had him all the way up inside the top 10 at number 7 in the Dynasty Rookies there. Some people said, hey, you should have him higher. And I don't actually think there's too much of a problem with considering him to be a higher option there, given how well he played. He, at 79 for the season, played 21 minutes with 7 points and 6.5 rebounds. He shot 69%.
Giggity!
He had 6.5 boards, 2.5 blocks, 60% from the line. I guess that's where you have some level of concern moving into that DeAndre Jordan-ish type territory, but obviously a much better shot blocker. But give him 30 minutes a night, which he did start to learn how to stay out of foul trouble at the end of the season. The value for him is going to be sky high. He will be a guy that it's going to be hard to get value on in drafts next season, just because everyone will be fired up about him, and then people will be taking him in the third round. I've got almost no doubt that he will start going in the third round next season, and then your risk-reward scenario with Robinson there becomes a little bit more clouded, because how much better than that can he get? Can he get to peak Hassan Whiteside? Maybe. He probably can get to that level and be that guy who can start to put up numbers. But over the last month, only 6 games, but that's April, 32 minutes a game. That's impressive. The 29th ranked player, 11 and 10, 2.3 blocks. Now, as we've seen throughout NBA history, as players work more to stay out of foul trouble, as they get to become smarter defenders, their block rate drops. And Robinson averaged, let's go per 36 numbers, 4.3 blocks per 36 over the course of the season. In those last 6 games, where he was able to play 32 minutes a night, 2.7 blocks per 36. So the trade-off between being able to stay on the court is that your blocks generally dip. That's something we've seen over the course of many, many, many NBA seasons, and I don't think Robinson's going to be immune to that. So we can't just look and go, well, 4.3 blocks per 36, he's going to be averaging 3.4 blocks a game, he's a top 10 guy, 14 and 10, let's go, 70% from the field. And the 70% from the field might stick. That might also drop as well. The free throw rate might increase. That's a bigger negative there. And the blocks, I think, will come down a bit next season. But he is going to be a top 50 guy, and he's going to be drafted similarly. So the value might disappear a little bit there. Dennis Smith Jr., not the greatest year from Smitty, the 150th ranked player over the 153rd, over the course of the season. He's still just 21 years of age, battled some back issues, which I think were bullshit during his time in Dallas. Only the 53 games, 29 minutes, 13.5 points, 3 rebounds, 5 assists, and 1.3 steals. This could go really one of 2 ways here. Smith stays. He is the point guard they build around. They play him 31, 32 minutes a night, and he pushes to be a top 70, top 80 player. Or Kyrie Irving or Kemba Walker comes to New York and he moves to the bench and just fizzles away. Those are both, I think, decently likely scenarios for this Knicks team and for what Smith is going to be able to do. Much like DeAndre Jordan, once he came over from the trade in Dallas, or came over with the trade in Dallas, his PIPM was a negative 0.07, so right about neutral in that area. He was a plus 3.3, so that's That's a positive there, while starter Emmanuel Mudiay, again, the minutes that David Fizdale gave to Mudiay was, it seemed pretty ridiculous from a team building and development point of view. And they're saying, oh yeah, we want to give him an opportunity to go out there because we're not going to be able to pay him next season. That literally benefits the Knicks in zero way at all. I don't see how it has any benefit for them. They're not gaining anything by trading and getting assets back for Mudiay. They're not developing chemistry with him and their other players that they're going to keep. They're not seeing exactly what they can get from Smith during that time. And Mudiay is just not a positive on-court player. So that was, again, one of those failures. I'm not going to shit on Fizdale too much. I could do half an hour of talking about how much of a dick he was during the season with the things that he pulled, the coaching moves, the rotation moves, the personnel, all that sort of stuff. But I'm not going to do it for today's show. But Smith, that's a positive. A plus 3.3 is a positive. A neutral PIPM, relative positive for this team that did lack so many different things in terms of value from players or players actually playing well. Smith still has his concerns. Free throw percentage is a worry there. He was up to 43% from the field, 32% from three. These numbers do need to improve, but 14 and 5 in 29 minutes with 1.3 steals. There's a workable base there. I look at him not because they've got the same first name, because I see similar issues in their game. Dennis Schroeder type of a player who could be a top 50, top 60 guy. Smith has the concern of poor free throw percentage, which Schroeder doesn't have, so that holds him back a bit. But I'd still be, again, it's all going to depend on what happens in free agency, but if someone wants to sell him low in a dynasty, I still have belief in Smith, but this could end up being a not great scenario for him here in New York. As for Mudiay, 27 minutes a night for Manny, 15 points, 3 rebounds, and 4 assists. Those 15 points are nice, and he did take a really big step forward in efficiency. True shooting of 53%. 45 and 77 from the field and from the line, and 33% from three. But much like the Padawan Colin Sexton, the inability to set guys up, lacking defensive stuff, 0.7 steals, 0.3 blocks, 3.9 assists, 3 rebounds, only 1.2 threes. He is a significantly better points league fantasy player than category league guy. And with his free agency coming up, I see no team that's going to be investing in Emmanuel Mudiay as a starting point guard. Is he better than, say, Chris Dunn in Chicago? Probably not. We could make the argument. What other team is he a better point guard than? DJ Augustin in Orlando? No. And there's also Markelle Fultz there. Do you go to Memphis if Conley leaves and Delon Wright? I'd much rather have Delon Wright be my starting point guard in Dallas. Well, he's already been in Dallas and didn't really do much in that scenario. I don't see it from Mudiay really ever finding a starting role. I'm sure there's a team that I'm missing as what team he could go to as a point guard, and lots of scenarios could move around and players could find themselves in different spots, opening up an opportunity. I just don't really see it for Mudiay to be considered a guy that we should be investing in long term. A negative 2.46 PIPM is obviously not an ideal number. He was inefficient. Assist, now this is something you can get on Cleaning the Glass, so they've got to stat the assist to usage ratio for point guards in the 25th percentile, meaning he's just not distributing the ball as opposed to usage, which is either turnovers, which is him attempting to pass a lot of the time and not succeeding, or shooting the ball. So that's a really, really low number. A couple of their other guys, astonishingly low assist to usage ratios, which we'll talk about a bit later. Shooting wise, look, he hit his mid-ranges at a really high rate, which leads me to feel that that's not going to stick. 47% on long twos is a hard number to continue, and that really concerns me. That was the best number on this Knicks team outside of Courtney Lee, who hit them at an astonishing 59%, but he did that in just 157 minutes, whereas Mudiay played 10 times the amount of playing time there. Hitting those long twos at such a rate really does lead to that dropping down. Couldn't finish at the rim, 52% there as well. I think there's quite a few anomalies here with Mudiay's game, and I reckon this might be the best season he has in the remainder of his NBA career. The next guy we talk about, Noah Vonleh, who started out the season well, faded quite a bit. Another guy who is an unrestricted free agent, was the 156th ranked player this season. Really, really limited upside in my opinion. 8 and 8 he averaged with 2 assists, 0.7 steals and 0.8 blocks, 47 and 71, 34% from three. That sort of low field goal percentage doesn't really cut it as a power forward. The lack of defensive numbers, low usage. I just don't see him as a guy that teams will be looking at to be a solid player. Now, for all their guys who played the majority of minutes, they had They had nine players who played over 1,000 minutes this season. In terms of PIPM, he was second in that lot behind Mitchell Robinson. Still didn't approach a positive there, negative 0.13, but second on the team in wins added was a key part in providing at least some stability. But his fantasy upside is pretty limited, Vonleh, and he is best suited to be an Ed Davis type, a strong rebounder who plays 19 to 20 minutes off the bench and is a deep league fantasy guy. And like Mudiay, this is probably the best season that he will have for the remainder of his career. Still just 23, so maybe I'm being a little bit harsh on him. Mudiay is still just 23 as well. But I don't really see the huge levels of upside there for Noah Vonleh as someone who is... someone who's going to take big steps forward and be able to provide those numbers which saw him for a stage being a top 100 player. It doesn't seem like something that's a sustainable model. Also, really poor finishing around the rim for a big man as well. 13th percentile in terms of finishing around the rim. That's not ideal. There also, despite taking almost half of his shots, that's part of that reason that field goal percentage is so low. For Vonleh, he also struggles with defensive stuff, acquiring defensive stats. He's not massive on that, sort of below average in both of those categories. Let's go to the next guy in terms of fantasy rank, Kadeem Allen, 176 on the season. He played in 19 games and 22 minutes. Mainly he's ranked this high because the games that he did play when, say, Mudiay and Smith were out, he'd come in and he'd play big minutes. He showed flashes. He is already 26 years of age, averaged 10 points with 4 assists, shot really well, 46 and including 47% from three, a number which is not going to be able to stick for Kadeem Allen. Shot really well again on the long mid-ranges, long twos, 47% there. Not a number that's likely to stick. Hit 48% on his threes again. That's 98th percentile for a combo guard. Not numbers which we should be looking at as something going to stick. He's likely to be not likely to be on this team next season because of their thoughts in terms of free agency. So he's not going to be around. I don't really see massive amounts from him. His advanced numbers were okay during the season, Kadeem, but I don't really see him as a super strong option long term. Again, he is already 26, 3 years older than Emmanuel Mudiay, and is a long way down the pecking order in terms of being able to provide value for a fantasy squad. Next up is Damien Dotson, a guy who had really quite a few significant moments this season. With the way things are shaping up, it does look like he won't be on this team next season, as they will likely waive that non-guaranteed $1.6 million salary to try and get those 2 max slots. That may not happen, but he is definitely in the firing line to not be on this team for next season, which does really change quite a few things. He was second on the team in minutes, a negative 1.43 PIPM, obviously not an ideal number, but still a plus 2.3 on-off. He, like everyone on this team, suffered through the nonsense that is David Fizdale's playing time and minutes. Started out strong, played some big games, moved to the bench, limited playing time. Even look at the way he started the season, right? Game 2, 14 points in 32 minutes, 20 and 10 in 35 minutes, 12 and 7 in 30. Then he had 28 minutes, 32 minutes, 36, 30, 41, and then inexplicably 18, 23, 21, 23, 19, 14. Like there's no rhyme nor reason. Came back, big minutes again, then they dropped off, got injured, small minutes again, and then at the end of the season we saw some pretty big runs there from Damien Dotson, but still, in the last 20 games of the season, he played 34 minutes a night and was the 183rd ranked player. That is as poor a minutes to production ratio as you can find. That's Tony Snell level of ineptitude. 13 points with 2 triples, no steals, no blocks, poor field goal percentage, low assists, low rebounds, just nothing overly sensational. His best category was his threes, followed by free throw percentage, and even then, neither of those two things were really, really strong. He did put up some impressive shooting performances, no doubt, and it wasn't fueled by crazy type of shooting numbers. In fact, he's got significant room to improve on his short twos. Only 22% of his short 2-pointers, which are shots between 4 and 14 feet. That free throw line range. So room to improve that area. Hit 45% of his corner threes. 37% of his threes overall. There were enough positive things for Dotson that you think, well, he can be an NBA caliber rotation player. Just finding it on this team might be a little bit tougher for him to do. He was, again, the 203rd ranked player, 208th ranked player over the course of this season, averaging 11 points with 3.6 rebounds and 1.8 assists and 0.8 steals. But there's a bit there when you look at Dotson where you go, I don't really see how much better he's getting here, especially from what he did over that end course of the season where he was 183rd in 34 minutes. Okay, where does he get better from there? And that's the concern we have to look at with Dotson and the role that he takes on. Because he started big chunks of games on this team down the stretch. Everyone's aware of that big stretch he had at the end of the year, as we just talked about. He started a bunch of games, but depending on what the Knicks do in free agency, will he have that opportunity again to play that level of minutes and have that level of involvement in the offense? Only a 16% usage, which I guess could be thought to improve, and some okay efficiency, but still, I think the idea of Damien Dotson and the idea we may have had in our head of how he performed actually outstrips what the actual production was from him. Let's talk Luke Kornet now, a guy who showed some really impressive advanced stats, plus 1.53 PIPM, really strong numbers there. A plus 5.3 on-off, that's impressive. 17 minutes a game only. He is yet to turn 24. We'll do that in a couple of months. 7 points, 3 rebounds with 1.5 threes, but 0.6 steals and 0.9 blocks in 17 minutes. Let's put that to 34. 1.2 steals and 1.8 blocks. That's impressive. He'll never get 34 minutes, but there is at least a little bit of something there. The efficiency is a problem. 38% from the field, 36% from 3, which we like. We like the 36% from 3. We don't like the fact that he couldn't seem to hit any 2-pointers at all. That's somewhat of an issue for Kornet, and a lot of it's just because he struggles significantly on his shots at the rim, 57%, his short mid-ranges, his free throw line distant jumpers, 29%, long twos, 23%, so just could not hit those twos at all. In fact, all of his shots that weren't at the rim, that weren't threes, 27%. That obviously needs to work on a lot. Hit 48% on corner threes, so there is an archetype of a decent player, a guy that fits into an Ersan Ilyasova, shot-blocking Ryan Anderson, but lower volume Ryan Anderson type of a player. But again, restricted free agent. Will he be back on this team? They almost undoubtedly have to cancel his rights. I couldn't think of the right word there. Cancel's still not the right words. Renounce his rights. That's it. His restricted cap hold for them to get this cap space, which the cap hold is only $2 million. But if they want to really maximize and get that $71 million, they need every dollar they can get to get those 2 max players. And that means, unfortunately, Kornet is gone. But I could see him having a role on an NBA team. And yeah, maybe if he wasn't getting dicked around by just absolute nonsense, and you want to look at game logs and ridiculous playing time, Kornet's the guy to look at there in New York, because the playing time was absolutely stupidity of what Fizdale was doing. He'd start him playing 30 minutes for 2 games, and then 17, then 18 minutes, then bench him DMP for 4 games, then put him back in just so we could get Lance Thomas's 30 minutes. And Lance Thomas seems like a great bloke, but there's no need for anything like that. Mario Hezonja, massive disappointment this season. I thought his actual play on the court was okay, but again, he got fizzed in a really hard manner. 21 minutes a game, 9, 4, and 1.5 with a steal, 41 and 76. Only 28% from 3 is obviously a disaster. That's very, very poor in terms of shooting. He hit 11% of his corner threes. That's obviously a number which is not going to be able to continue, and it won't continue. No player really goes around shooting 11% of corner threes, which is what he did, and that was 6% of his overall shots were corner threes. You can't expect that level of ineptitude to continue, and so he will be better than that as we move forward. I thought he did just about not all you could ask for, because you would have hoped for better shooting, but I thought he was a solid enough player. He should have started nearly all of this season. He didn't. He had runs at the end of the year. He still was a negative in PIPM, negative 1.79. I just don't know where he goes from here. This was set up for him to have a good opportunity. He got riddled with one of the worst coaches in the NBA, which did cause some struggles in his game. Yeah, confidence was a real issue. Maybe if he goes to a team where the coach doesn't intrinsically hate European players, then it will help him out as he moves forward. But I still think there's a glimmer in Mario Hezonja. Will he ever crack the top 100? Probably not. Will he get and have a top 150 season? I could see it. He's just turned 24, so there is some value there in him for a team that is looking for a guy that can play as a ball handling 3, that can play up as a 4, and can take point guard duties. That's a good archetype. If that shooting comes around, I still have some faith in Hezonja, but this was the year for him to really make it count, and unfortunately he didn't. Let's go to the next guy, Alonso Tree, 244th. I did bump him up pretty significantly in my Dynasty rookie re-ranks. There was a lot of Danish backhanders, Turkish grips, Dutch rudders going on about Trier. And in the end, I think the hype was absolutely overblown. A negative 2.56 PIPM this season. On-off, he was a negative 0.1, which is not a bad number for a rookie. But overall, in 23 minutes, he averaged 11 points, 3 rebounds and 2 assists. Absolutely no impact defensively. 0.4 and 0.2 for steals and blocks. Efficiency, true shooting of 56. You cannot ask for more than that from a rookie. 39% shooting from 3 was really strong from Trier. He is already 23 years of age. He's older than Emmanuel Mudiay and just marginally younger than Noah Vonleh and about a year younger than Mario Hezonja. Sorry, that's not true. About a year younger than Mario Hezonja. I was right on that initially. So he's not the youngest of rookies, but he showed enough. The thing that worries me here is that when I look at that assist to usage ratio, he's in the 6th percentile for combo guards. That is obviously horrible. 0.59 assist to usage ratio. Not the worst on this team by any stretch, but as a guy who handles the ball as much as he does, he just doesn't look for other players. His play style, his nickname, ISO, is not conducive to a good NBA offense. He might be able to get you the couple of bailout shots, and he did have some big games. But overall, I don't think his game is necessarily one that's going to suit a starting caliber player at any point in the future. And I think that he's going to be a guy that can put up numbers in March and April on bad teams and struggle at other styles. He's almost a better Antonio Blakeney type from Chicago. And if you want to talk about guys with poor assist to usage ratios, the man next, the fort, Kevin Knox, the 277th ranked player for fantasy, did it in 29 minutes a game. That is really hard to do. Now, in saying this, he is young. He still has not turned 20 years of age. He played 29 minutes a game. He fell victim to the Fizdale nonsense as well. He started all through preseason. No, if Kevin struggles, we've got to play him through it. He's got to play through it. He's got to learn. He's got to learn. He's got to learn. 2 days before the season, or actually we're going to bench Kevin and we're going to start Lance Thomas and Frank Ntilikina at the 3 and the 4 instead because he was struggling. So I don't care what you want to tell me. Oh, you can't have someone out there. The lack of confidence that you have, or that you must have when your coach is saying one thing to you, saying one thing to the media, and then reversing it 2 days later where nothing changes in terms of on-court play, and you're moved in and out of the lineup consistently. You play 40 minutes one night, then you play 25 minutes a night for 2 weeks, then you go back to 40 minutes a night. That's all a problem. And then his inefficiency was historically bad. He was historically bad. He was one of the worst rookies of all time this season, Kevin Knox. He had a absolutely terrible PIPM of negative 4.9, wins added, negative 3.32. It's pretty hard work to actually be a negative wins added player. And he wasn't just a negative wins added player. He was a negative by a very, very big margin. The Knicks was 6.9 points per 100 possessions better off with him sitting on the bench versus on the court, a staggeringly large number. And that assist to usage ratio, 5th percentile amongst forward, 0.29, just doesn't pass. And these are the problems I had with Knox heading into the season. Let's go through his numbers. 13, 4.5, and 1, with 0.6 steals, 0.3 blocks. I worried that he couldn't rebound very well. 4.5 rebounds in 29 minutes as a power forward is bad. 1 assist, horrible. 0.6 steals, piss poor. 0.3 blocks, Ryan Anderson would like that number and he would like to say, hey, lift your game. 37%, 72% from the line, oof. 34% from 3, yeah, that's okay. You can work with that. And he's got massive room to growth. And if he came in next season and shot 44% from the field and shot 77% from the line and hit 36% from his threes, I'd say that's a distinct possibility. What I worry is the things that he lacked in Kentucky, the things that he lacked here, is a lack of defensive awareness, defensive skills, playmaking ability, vision, rebounding, hitting threes in volume, and none of that thing showed through that season. I am massively down on him as a starting caliber player, as a dynasty asset. I think that he would be absolutely worth a flyer as a late round fantasy pick, but you get Kevin Durant here, he's taking his position. So where does Knox actually fit there? My long-term upside for him is not great. I don't have huge amounts of faith in what he is able to do as a player. He shot 48% at the rim, horrible on quite a lot of attempts. His mid-ranges, his long twos, 29%. That's really not a good number at all. He took quite a lot of shots from there. He was in the 80th percentile in terms of taking long twos. Compare that to being in the 43rd percentile in taking threes. So his shot selection is off. His assists are off. His defensive stats are well below average. He has a lot to work on to be a quality NBA player and to be a quality fantasy player, and my faith in him doing it is pretty low. After him, there's not many guys on this roster. There's Isaiah Hicks, Henry Allenson, Billy Garrett, Lance Thomas, Johnny Jenkins. I don't need to talk about any of those guys here, I don't think, but I do want to talk about Frank Ntilikina, who was an abject disappointment. 21 years of age for Ntilikina. He was the 318th ranked player this season, 21 minutes a night. Also, fell victim to the Fizdale nonsense. Fizdale hates European players. Ntilikina, the latest example of that. The refusal to even try him as a point guard for chunks of this season and last season is poor. He had great chemistry with Porzingis in his rookie season. Obviously, that couldn't happen this year because Porzingis didn't play, but they refused to do him in that, use him in that role last year. Even this season, when he did provide some okay performances and production, he just wasn't used enough, had injuries which really bothered him. He was a negative 2.6 PIPM, which is not a great number. It's obviously not the worst. Kevin Knox significantly lower than that. There's a negative 0.4 on off. It's okay. It's not the worst. It's not the best. He still shows really strong defensive instincts, but his offense is an absolute disaster. And if I had to bet on it, he won't be on this team next season. They will be looking to shed that $5 million contract. Better double check that number. $4.9 million deal for next season. They will be looking to shed that for Ntilikina. They won't want him on this team. His future in New York is done. Him moving to another team, I look at him at this point almost like a Dante Exum type of fantasy player, a guy that can come in and have good defensive impact, but have zero impact fantasy-wise, even in the defensive stats. So my hope for Ntilikina is pretty much cooked. I like to give guys 3 years. He is really on the chopping block, and I'm not super confident in him being able to produce anything that's going to get me excited. 29% on his twos, 34% from the field. He really hasn't had a massive go in those development minutes like that were afforded to Knox and to Tree this season, and even to Dotson. He hasn't had that opportunity, but you could easily make the argument, and I'd listen to it, that he hasn't even deserved to get that level of play, despite Kevin Knox being literally one of the worst players in the history of the game last year. He still got those opportunities, but that sort of leeway is not generally afforded to Ntilikina, and that's somewhat of a problem. I thought Allenson showed some flashes. He's going to be interesting to see whether he can catch on, but he's never going to find a large role. Billy Garrett did nothing to excite me. Isaiah Hicks just absolutely absent this year after a couple of okay performances last season as well. Well, Lance Thomas, you'd have to think that his time in the NBA is running pretty low. Defensively, he can hold up. He just is an absolute black hole's not the right word because he's not sucking the ball in, never getting out. He just is a nothing offensively, and that really does lead to some problems with the offense when he is on the court. Though his defense does have somewhat of an impact, but plus still a negative 3.5 on off is not the number that you are looking for with this team. So I want to go through the guys who are actually pluses in on-offs this year. Dotson, Vonleh, Mitchie Robinson, plus 3.8, Luke Kornet of plus 5.3, Dennis Smith, Kadeem Allen, then you had Allenson and Jenkins, who were also pluses on this team. So not many guys were positive on-offs guys, but the guys we look at it, like Robinson, we look at Dotson showing some flashes, Vonleh being solid, we look at Kornet as being a maybe upside guy, but so much for this team is up in the air depending on what they do with that free agency space, and you'd have to imagine all of those guys are gone, plus the... if they could get rid of Ntilikina and not take back any money, then maybe Alonso Tree's spot on this roster is safe. As I mentioned, he's got a $3.5 million team option, so if they can get rid of Ntilikina's 4.9, and that would enable them to keep Trier, and then that would actually create them another $1.4 million in cap space, which helps in their pursuit of free agents as well. That will do it for the Knicks and their season in review. Pretty meek, that's not the right word, meager time of things for the Knicks, but Mitchell Robinson, this upside is massive. He could easily be a top 20 guy. I think probably top 40, top 35 is a more realistic expectation for him, with an expectation that those block numbers do decrease. Still have faith in Dennis Smith, not no faith really in Neal Akina, no faith really in Knox. I think Trier and Dotson are a little fool's goldie, and I still have marginal hope for Hezonja, while Vonleh, I'm not really sure that he can produce what he did again this season. Check out today's sponsor, which is ZipRecruiter. ZipRecruiter.com/lockedon is the web address that you go to. And don't forget to subscribe to this podcast, Locked On Fantasy Basketball, on the Himalaya podcast app, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and on Spotify. Follow me on Twitter at redrock_Beeble. Subscribe on YouTube. Give that thumbs up a big, hit the thumbs up. Subscribe. Hit the bell for notifications. You know all this stuff. Hopefully this mixer worked okay with the audio after my snafus earlier in the day. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya. The Woodslinger, Dennis Smith Jr.